It's safe to say that one thing most human beings have in common is that they don't want to end up in the hospital. Whether it's for an illness, something sudden, something planned, a childbirth, hospital is a place you don't want to be. But if you do end up there, you want to make sure that you're getting the best kind of care. Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, in Borough Park, has been a community hospital for over 100 years. And recently, something has come up that is garnering rumors and a lot of speculation about how the future of the hospital will unfold. I spoke to Mr. Mordechai or Motty Waisbrod, who is a board member of Maimonides Hospital and also a community activist in Brooklyn, to talk about Maimonides, its history, the transition it might be going to, and what that means for the future. This is a conversation you do not want to miss. I don't usually start with Jewish geography, but as soon as I walked into your house this morning and met you for the first time, I realized that I'm pretty sure I know your brother. In Toronto?
Yes.
Okay.
Bavram.
A good man.
Baruch Hashem.
Did you grow up in the United States?
I grew up in the United States. I came here as a child from Israel.
Okay. And I understand that you're now involved in a lot of business and then community work. How did you go from a regular boy who studied in yeshiva to where you are now?
Yes, I started off in yeshiva.
Okay.
And once I left yeshiva, I went into business.
What kind
I went
of business?
into real estate management. And from real estate management, I migrated towards construction and development. And that's pretty much what I do today is construction and development, plus technology business in the construction field and the sustainability business in the construction field as well.
Okay. And I understand that you're also on the board of Maimonides Hospital.
That's correct. I joined the board, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. And what prompted you to join the board?
So I was asked to join the board as being a member of the community. I lived in Borough Park, Brooklyn until recently, until a few years ago. And over there, I was very active in Borough Park Hatzala. And from there, they asked me to get involved in the board to try to bring more of the community perspective towards the board and towards the operations of the hospital.
So they wanted the board to reflect the community that the hospital was serving?
Correct. They wanted that there would be board members that were on the board that had the best interests of the community at heart. Obviously, our fiduciary duty is to the hospital as an organization, but bringing the perspective of the community and what the community needs and what the community wants to the hospital administration is something that they were looking for.
Understood. How old is the hospital? Like, when was it founded?
Hospital was founded actually on June 25th. I believe it was now on June 25th. I'm sorry, June 11th of 1911. I believe it was. It started off as the New Utrecht Dispensary. It was essentially just a group of Jewish women that got together to open what was then known as a quasi hospital. It wasn't what we understand a hospital to be today, but it was the beginnings of the hospital.
That's almost like exactly 115 years ago.
Yes.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that old.
Yes.
There were Jews living in Borough Park that long ago?
Yep, there were. And it's actually quite interesting. From there, it moved on and became another hospital. It joined forces with another hospital and was known as Israel Zion Hospital. I believe it had another name before that, but from Israel Zion, it transformed into Maimonides Medical Center, and it had the different iterations of Maimonides Medical Center, Maimonides Hospital, and now it's Maimonides Health, which is essentially a health system that has 3 hospitals to it: Maimonides Medical Center in Borough Park, Brooklyn, Community Medical Center in Midwood, Brooklyn, and the Children's Hospital, which is part of the Borough Park campus.
I didn't realize there was another campus in Midwood.
Yeah, they recently acquired that a number of years ago. I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago. Not exactly sure when it happened, but it was renamed. I believe it was 2 years ago that it was renamed into Maimonides Community Medical Center.
Got it. And how large is the hospital? Like, how many rooms, how many buildings, how many staff?
I don't know the exact space that they actually occupy, but they have licensed, I believe, somewhere close to 800 beds. They don't use that to capacity because there's always beds that are circling in and out of service due to various problems within the hospital. But they're pretty much close to max most of the time. The exact census is probably well over 700 on a daily basis.
And would you say that the the people who primarily use the services of the hospital are members of the Jewish community in Borough Park?
Well, not primarily. A large percentage of the Jewish community, a large percentage of the census is the Jewish community in Borough Park. But there are other communities that live within the Borough Park area that use it. The Chinese American community,
Of course.
the Muslim community, they all use the hospital. And the hospital prides itself, and as it should, to serve all those communities, and they serve them equally.
I understand. So I don't know much about the hospital. I mean, I've lived in Borough Park at times throughout my life. We've had at times family members in the hospital. But I've visited a bunch of times. I understand that recently there's been some very profound changes that have either been made or are being suggested to be made or in contract to be made. And my understanding is that the community is not thrilled about what might happen to the hospital. And I was wondering if you could help clarify for me what is going on with the hospital at this point in time.
So Maimonides Medical Center as a hospital has had its ups and downs over the years. On a clinical level, they've had years where clinically they weren't doing so well. They had a nursing issue, and then they've improved over the last couple of years, where to the point where clinically it's in a very strong position. The hospital is a great hospital today. Financially, not so. Financially, they were doing well or breaking even before COVID. COVID sort of did it in, and post-COVID, the hospital struggled tremendously with its finances, losing in the area of $300 to $400 million a year, which has been subsidized by New York State in order to keep the hospital alive.
Who actually owns the hospital? Like who's losing that money?
So the hospital is owned by a non-for-profit. So it's not privately owned. There are no privately owned hospitals in New York State. All hospitals in New York State are either public or owned by a non-for-profit.
Is that a legal structure, or is just the way things work out?
Well, it's more than a legal structure. It's a practical structure, which means that the hospital was started and supported by people of the community that wanted to have a hospital. And throughout its history, that's how it's being supported. So besides the fact that it actually generates revenue from insurance, private pay, federal government, etc., they also generate donations, and people give towards the donations. So it's like any other charity that exists. It's supported by donations, partially by donations, and those donations have come from the community in the form of supporting the hospital's mission.
Right, I understand. My question, though, is it illegal to have a privately owned hospital in New York State?
Yes, it is not. You cannot legally own a privately owned hospital in New York State. That's correct.
Okay. We're going to be right back, but first let's take a short break to thank the sponsor, the first sponsor of this episode, which is Luxury Kosher Villas in Florida. My friend, Shaya Weinberger, has a business where he rents out dozens of homes in Florida, in North Miami Beach, in Boca Raton, in Hollywood, in Boynton Beach. And essentially what he does is he provides homes for families who are looking for a kosher vacation. They want to go to a home that is owned by Jewish people, that is in a Jewish neighborhood where you can have synagogues in walking distance, kosher restaurants in driving distance and in walking distance, private pools. And Shaya provides really nice homes. I've stayed at his homes many times in different neighborhoods throughout Miami. Also, his customer service is great. I highly recommend calling Shaya Weinberger, let him know that I sent you, and use his services, use his homes. You're going to have a great time. They're in beautiful neighborhoods. They're beautiful homes. They're well taken care of. And the best thing is that he has everything you need. If you're a Jewish family going on vacation, you want to make sure you have a kosher kitchen. You want to make sure there are Jewish facilities nearby. You want to make sure that you have little religious items that you might need for whatever comes up during your stay. Reb Shaya Weinberger and Luxury Kosher Villas has that already. So call 305-449-9899. That's 305-449-9899, or go to luxurykoshervillas.com. I'm going to put a link in the description of the video and a link to the phone number for WhatsApp. You can call him, text him, send him an email, whatever you need to do. Call Reb Shaya Weinberger and book your vacation in Florida today. Thank you, Shaya and Luxury Kosher Villas, for sponsoring this episode. I also want to thank my friend Mendy Weiss from JOYRIDE Auto Leasing. If you have a car that you're happy with, but your lease is ending soon, or you have a car that you're not happy with, and you need a new car soon, Mendy Weiss will take care of you in the best way possible. Mendy provides amazing customer service, and he makes sure that every single need that you have when looking for a car is taken care of. The first time I was looking for a car, I called Mendy. I had no idea what I was doing, but he got me calm. He got me a car really quickly for a great price. But the best thing is that it was with service, with a smile. He got it done really quickly. I think from when I signed the lease until I had the car was about 24 hours, and I was very happy. I've since leased another car from him because his service is second to none. So feel free to call Mendy, send him a text or a WhatsApp at 347-554-1266. That's 347-554-1266. I'm also going to put a link in the description of the video so that you can reach out to JOYRIDE Auto Leasing. Thank you, Mendy. To advertise on this podcast, call 718-395-3465, 718-395-3465. So you're saying they were losing $300 to $400 million a year?
Well, the exact math is not. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's all public record. So I'm not saying anything that's proprietary in any which way. It's all public record. But they were losing a lot of money, and that money was being subsidized by New York State. The reason that New York State subsidized the hospital is because it's a hospital that's extremely important for the communities, because besides it being a large hospital, it also provides services that other hospitals don't provide. It's a trauma center. It's the only pediatric trauma center in Brooklyn. It has pediatric ICU. It has a pediatric standalone ER, the only pediatric standalone ER in Brooklyn, which recently opened. It has a NICU. It has a PICU. It has a PACU. It has full services from what's called tertiary and quaternary care. So that's a second level and a third level of care, of specialty and subspecialties that not every hospital carries, and they carry that. So it's considered a very important part of the healthcare in Brooklyn. And New York State recognizes that, and that's why New York State has been subsidizing the hospital.
Okay. Now, why do you think, like, if you could point to a reason, as somebody on the board, why the hospital started bleeding money post-COVID, why do you think that is?
Well, there's many factors that we believe have caused it. There's the overall factor of compensation has gone down, expenses have gone up, just like we all know in our homes. Inflation, makes things cost more, but not necessarily do you earn enough to keep up with inflation. So Inflation has hurt hospitals as well. Plus the payment that they get from either insurers or from the federal government has gone down over the years through various different policies and programs. Cost of labor has gone up, so having nurses and doctors and all the specialties that you need has gone up. So when you have costs going up and income going down, that would cause you to lose money. But we believe that there's other factors that are more in control. There's been some missed opportunities with acquisitions that could have happened, private practices that didn't happen.
Meaning that the hospital would have acquired other medical facilities nearby?
Not facilities, but private practices. So let's say there's a private practice that has 4, 5, or 6 doctors, whatever it is, and they have a certain amount of patients. So you can acquire those private practices and bring them under the roof of the hospital, which is happening a lot. Used to be traditionally, right, there was private doctors' offices all over Borough Park, all over Flatbush. Today, they're much less so because they all became parts of what's called an FQHC, Federal Qualified Healthcare Center. So they all come under their umbrella because that way their costs are more contained and they're able to charge more money, so they make more money. So the same thing, the hospital, for one, it's not an FQHC, which is one missed opportunity, which could have been many, many times over. So that's one missed opportunity. They had the opportunity to acquire multiple different practices over the years, which weren't acquired, which we believe was missed opportunities. They didn't innovate in the arena of technology as much as they could have, specifically the technology of electronic medical records and electronic billing, which there's a system called Epic, which runs most of the large hospital systems in the country, which Maimonides never did. And that in itself, it could have brought in an extra $100 or $150 million in estimated revenue annually to the hospital. So it's missed opportunity after missed opportunity that has led us to think that perhaps the administration could have done better, and perhaps it's time for a new administration that could do better and make one of the changes that would have to do with making the hospital better, besides everything else, would be, a change in leadership. If in the corporate world, if you're seeing that you're losing money year after year after year, the first thing you do is you change the leadership. And if that doesn't work, then you look at other things. In this case, that hasn't even been discussed. So, we believe that that's something that should have been discussed and perhaps even been acted on. Okay.
I'm going to ask you a question you might not like, but I think it's an important question that needs to be asked. I know that during COVID, there were, I don't know how to say this, but a lot of hospitals, a lot of doctors, a lot of medical facilities got certain things wrong. Like, especially in the beginning of COVID, people were not sure what this new virus or disease was, and ultimately, I think there were people who probably could have been saved, but weren't saved due to mistakes that were made. I don't think this was a problem that was unique to Maimonides, but the question is, do you think that is a contributing factor to why the hospital might not be doing so well at this point in time?
I don't think so. I think that COVID was a universal challenge and a national challenge, and regionally it was very challenging to multiple different hospitals. I don't think any patient that went into any hospital anywhere in the world during COVID was happy with the service they received. There was, it was a very unique situation and has never been lived through before. So it caused unique challenges. So I don't think the COVID did the hospital in on a clinical level. I think they suffered from staffing shortages post-COVID that were rampant throughout all the hospitals. They I believe did not act fast enough on curing those problems, but they did eventually act on curing those problems. And like I said, the hospital today in the clinical level is in a very good spot, but it's not going to last long that way, is because while the hospital is continuously negotiating the position that they're in now, that's going to lead to a rash of doctors that are going to be leaving the hospital, because doctors like job security, and if they don't know who the next owner of the hospital is going to be, that's a lack of job security. So that's probably going to affect the clinical care of the hospital in short order.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. But do you think, post-COVID, a lot of people had their minds changed about the medical system in general? People felt like at times there were surgeon generals or heads of the federal agencies who either lied to the American people or misled the American people. And I think overall, trust in the health system in the United States has gone down tremendously since COVID. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Do you think that could be a contributing factor to why the hospital is not doing so well?
Financially, I don't think so. I think that, yes, originally it put the hospital, the COVID in itself, because of the extra expenses that all hospital systems had to incur, and because of all the additional measures that they had to take with staffing and all that, put the hospitals in a bad position. They were spending a lot more money per patient that was not part of their regular scheduled expenses per patient. So that throws all the budgets into chaos. So yes, Maimonides did suffer through that. And COVID also reset sort of the healthcare in America in a way where costs went up dramatically post-COVID. And it essentially reset the economies of the world. So everything went up post-COVID. So it just, trickled down into hospital systems, just like it did any other business, but hospital systems suffered significantly more because of COVID. I don't think it was unique to Maimonides from the COVID. I don't think that was unique. There was a lot of complaints on Maimonides, yes, with the way they handled themselves. Yeah, because I remember
seeing protests, and there was a lot of noise about that.
So with the way they handled themselves during COVID and the way that they were slow in recovering post-COVID, there was a lot of complaints about that, and most of those complaints were earned complaints. In other words, Maimonides did not do what they should have done, but they did eventually regroup and get into a position where they caught up on staffing and they caught up on clinical services, and they are in a good position clinically today. But yes, they did take some time getting back to themselves, probably longer than others did.
Okay. And the nursing shortages, do you think that has to do with, again, it comes back to COVID. Nurses and doctors were really overworked. Crazy extra hours, overnight shifts. It was considered to be a very dangerous environment. People felt like the stress levels on these people were abnormal. Do you think that contributed to the nursing shortage that you dealt with?
So yes, but there was also, so that during COVID, yes, for sure. But post-COVID, I think is where what the focus needs to be on. And post-COVID, I believe that, like others, that the recruitment that the hospital was doing post-COVID fell short of where it needed to be, and that hurt them a lot. And I think that there was probably some financial aspect to it as to why they were slow on it. But I think it was also, again, I think it was poor management and poor leadership that led to it, and it took them a while to catch up to where they needed to be caught up to.
Okay, how many staff members are part of Maimonides Health?
Oh, I don't know the exact number, but in the thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And a couple of answers you gave me seem to go towards the direction of the leadership of the hospital, was not efficient enough or inadequate. Is that leadership still in place?
Yes.
Interesting. Is there something the community or the board can do to change the leadership?
Well, the board can effectuate change, but there is a huge gap within the board as to what the direction of the hospital should be. There's two sets of minds on what the hospital, in which direction the hospital should be going, and where to lay blame. We believe that the blame lies with the leadership, and the fact that they didn't act has brought us into this position, while recognizing that there are outside factors that are outside of the control of the leadership that that need to be changed, that can't be changed at a leadership level. But we believe that there's a lot on a leadership level that could at least make this better or mitigate some of the losses.
Okay. When you say we, like, how many people are on the board?
There is, I believe by last count, 22 members of the board or thereabout, and I am part of a group of 7 that's currently challenging the hospital in court.
So there's 7 against 15 who believe that effectively the change that has to be made is that the government should step in and take over the hospital?
Correct. Well, I don't know what they believe. I know what they voted on. So what they believe in their hearts of hearts, I don't know. I know that they voted on the hospital being transferred over to Health and Hospitals of New York City as essentially a takeover for zero money. Because
for zero money?
For zero money. So essentially what it is, that New York State, like I said earlier, is funding the hospital through various grants annually. And they cover
partially
the shortfall.
Funding.
Right. So they cover the shortfall. Let's call it that, right? So they cover the shortfall. So New York State didn't want to do that. So last year, Governor Hochul approved into her budget a law that would subsidize what's called safety net hospitals. So Maimonides is a safety net hospital. It's essentially, it means that a hospital is within a certain geographic area, serving a certain geographic need, serving a certain amount of services for that geographic need, and the communities within that geographic area that cannot fail for all essential purposes. New York State
must not fail,
right? So they consider them safety net hospitals. Maimonides is one of those safety net hospitals. It's the largest hospital within the safety net, quote unquote, arena. So she passed a law that essentially granted billions of dollars in aid that would be allocated to these safety net hospitals, provided that the safety net hospitals become part of another system. Because the belief is that a standalone hospital can no longer succeed or survive in the current environment, current healthcare environment. So they passed a law that would take these safety net hospitals and attach them to separate systems, and those systems would take them in under their umbrella. And by the nature of being part of a larger system, it helps you in various ways. It helps you in procurement, so you get better pricing in purchasing of medical supplies. You get better deals with the insurance companies on their reimbursements. You get better standing on malpractice purchase. You become swallowed up by a larger system, and with that, there would be a certain amount of money coming from the state to subsidize those systems in their acquisition of these safety net hospitals. So what she was doing with the point of the law is that she's essentially writing one big check instead of writing annual checks and continuing into indefinitely in supporting these hospitals. Instead of doing that, she's writing one big check and assigning that big check to a larger system and allowing that larger system to take in a smaller hospital and essentially clearing the problem off her table for the foreseeable future. Because now the hospital ceases to operate as a standalone hospital, becomes part of a system. She took that money and subsidized the system in their acquisition costs or in the costs associated with their acquisition, quote unquote acquisition. It's not really an acquisition, it's a takeover of the hospital. And that's how she solves that problem. That was the thought behind the law.
Okay. We're going to take another break to thank the third sponsor for the episode, which is Weber Tours. If you're looking to get away to Europe, if you want to see the Austrian Alps, the beautiful Alps, where I've been spending some time recently. I was there last summer for a week. I was there this year for Pesach, for Passover, with my whole family. We had a great time. There were so many nice views, nice experiences, amazing kosher food. There were religious services, entertainment. We had a really, really nice time in the Alps, and you can too. They're open all summer, Weber Tours in St. Anton in Austria. Reach out to them today. You can send them a message on WhatsApp. The phone number is 929-377-2299. That's 929-377-2299. I'm going to put a link in the description to their website and to their WhatsApp. And of course, you can go to their site, which is webertours.co.il. That's webertours.co.il. Thank you, Weber Tours. I also want to thank my friend Barry Pearlstein from Hire on Us. Many of you know me, some of you might not, but I'm a pretty busy guy. I'm running 3 podcasts per week. I have a weekly column in Ami Magazine. I'm traveling almost full time. I have a large WhatsApp status with thousands and thousands of subscribers. And there's a lot going on in my life. And for a long time, I was struggling to keep up with the pace of my own life. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fun, and it really was dragging me down. Enter Barry Pearlstein, came into my life with virtual assistants, with people who help me with my scheduling, with my editing. He has people who take care of everything for me. These are people who are offshore. You don't have to pay them a lot of money, but they really can get you a lot of bang for your buck. And if you've been following my content, you've seen in the last few months, thank God, things have exploded. I've gotten to do a lot more than I've ever been able to do previously, and that is thanks to Barry Pearlstein and Hire on Us. So if you're looking for a virtual assistant, a virtual employee, somebody to help you, to take the tasks that you don't have the time for, to get them done so that you can prosper and advance in your business and in your life, call Barry Pearlstein. Send them a message. Go to hireonus.com. I'm going to put a link in the description. Reach out to Barry. He'll take care of you just like he took care of me. Hireonus.com. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Hire on Us. At face value, it seems like a nice idea in theory. Like the government's going to come in and solve everything. And also, essentially, if you look at a hospital and you say, well, this hospital can't really survive on its own because it's bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So now the government comes in and they'll figure it out. But the community doesn't have to essentially solve this problem anymore. Uncle Sam's going to come in and do it. The problem, in your eyes, is what? Why is that not a good idea?
So it may be a good idea, but in the case of Maimonides, it was not proposed that it be taken over by a private health system. When we say private, we don't mean privately owned, but private meaning not a public system. And instead, Maimonides was coupled with New York City Health and Hospitals. New York City Health and Hospital is not a not-for-profit. It is a publicly owned entity. It is an entity that owns 11 or 12 hospitals that throughout New York City, which include Bellevue, Coney Island Hospital, Kings County, I believe, is also part of them, whatever. There are a bunch of hospitals, large hospitals. And it's a very large system. And that system is owned by New York City. And New York City operates them through an entity called New York City Health and Hospitals. And Health and Hospitals essentially owns those hospitals. What the exact ownership structure is, I don't know. That's available online. Whoever is interested can research it. But it's sort of New York City basically running it. So it's the government of New York City that runs these hospitals. In the case of Maimonides, it was deemed by the state government that they should become part of New York City Health and Hospitals. So they will cease to exist as a non-for-profit. New York City Health and Hospitals will take over Maimonides. So it's a complete takeover. And in return, New York City Health and Hospitals will be getting a grant of over $2 billion over the next 5 years to help them with this takeover of Maimonides so that they can absorb them within their system at a net zero cost to them. So that's where the money is essentially going.
So that $2 billion is specifically going to be allocated to New York City Health and Hospitals because of the Maimonides takeover?
That's correct.
Okay. So that would cover like 7 to 8 years of the losses that...
Well, they broke it down in different ways. There's a $500 million capital investment in facilities and making the hospital better. And then there's all kinds of a different breakdown. It doesn't make a difference what the breakdown is. The point is, yes, the overall structure is I'm giving you $2 billion or a little bit more than $2 billion over the next 5 years so that you can absorb Maimonides within your system. And then how does that solve the overall shortfall of funding? So the thought of it is, this is in theory how it's supposed to work, is that because Maimonides will now become part of Health and Hospitals, so now Maimonides will automatically get the Epic system that Health and Hospitals has. So that will recapture about $100 to $150 million of lost revenue through that system. They're going to get better deal in reimbursement from the federal government because as a public hospital, the system, the Health and Hospital system, is able to get 3 times as much reimbursement on per patient, per Medicaid patient, than as a standalone hospital is able to get, as a non-public hospital is able to get. So through Epic, through better reimbursement through the Medicaid, as well as through savings and efficiencies in procurement and malpractice insurance, and the fact that their reimbursement with private companies, private insurance companies is higher because they have more of an internal medicine practice. These four things essentially are thought, in theory, to be able to take Maimonides after 5 years and make them a net zero cost to the state, because all these efficiencies will be built in to them being part of a larger system, public system, and thereby the problem of Maimonides losing money goes away. That's the theory of it.
Okay. In theory, it sounds nice. Why are you against it?
Because we don't believe certain parts of it. So first of all, the Epic part of it, which is the $150 million, Epic has a cost to it, whether it's 60, 70, 80 million dollars, whatever the case is to institute Epic within a system. So let's say the state government decided to fund that, right? And we get Epic. Maimonides as a standalone hospital gets Epic. Right there's $100 to $150 million in extra revenue that's brought in every single year. It's lost revenue. It's essentially not happening because of bad input into computer systems that are thereby billing the federal government and private insurances. So it's essentially, let's say you're a car mechanic, right? And you did work on a car, you changed the brakes, you gave a tune-up, you did a wheel alignment, and when you bill, you only billed for 2 of the 3 items. Are you going to lose money? Of course you're going to lose money. So this system essentially protects you from not being able to do that. It captures everything that happens within the hospital, every culture, every blood test, every diagnostic test, every procedure, every treatment. It captures everything into one place. And when it shoots out a bill to either the federal government through Medicaid or the state government, whoever's managing the Medicaid, or to private insurance, it makes sure that you checked all the T's and dotted all the I's so that the bill won't be rejected by these insurers and you're going to get compensated for it. So there's a loss that's happening now naturally because Maimonides is not at the cutting edge of technology when it comes to medical billing, and that's being lost. So they think it's between $100 to $150 million of recaptured revenue. So that has nothing to do with becoming part of a public system. If somebody in Borough Park were to write an $80 million check and say, go get Epic, we would recapture that $100 to $150 million. So that has nothing to do. So that's not a standalone reason why we should be giving away the hospital for zero to a public system. That's
you're saying the government is not needed for that.
Correct.
That can
we
be
don't
done
need the
privately.
government for that.
Okay.
Now, the next big thing, this is a big thing, which is a fact that a public system can get up to 3 times more reimbursement, up to 3 times higher reimbursement per Medicaid patient than a private hospital can. Now, Maimonides is about 80% Medicaid. That's what it is because of who the community is and where the hospital sits geographically. It captures about 20% private pay and 80% Medicaid, which is not a healthy percentage to be at if you're running a hospital. You'd like that percentage to be at 70%. So because it's 80% Medicaid and you're losing money essentially on every patient, if you're able to charge 3 times as much, obviously you're going to make money on those patients. That only exists within a public system. Only a public system can charge that kind of money for a Medicaid patient.
But if it's a public system and the hospital is being reimbursed, that money, isn't that going right back into the public system?
Correct. It's going into the public system, but it negates the losses of whatever entity you're working with. So if Maimonides becomes a public hospital, it's going to negate the losses to the tune of whatever reimbursement you're making. So
that sounds like an upside.
It is an upside. So that upside we can't argue with, except to say that it's not a guaranteed upside because the federal government votes on this either annually or biannually. And there's been a constant shift in Washington to cut and cut and cut. So just because that is true today does not mean it's going to be true in a year from now or 2 years from now and 3 years from now. So imagine we gave away a hospital, right? We gave away a hospital to a public system because we believe that the public system is going to get better reimbursement and thereby cut the expenses of the hospital, or the losses of the hospital, I should say. And it turns out to be not the case because the federal government decided a year later that they're changing the policy and now they're going back to in other words, there's nothing guaranteeing within the law that this will stay the fact in perpetuity. So it gets renewed. So it doesn't mean that just because it's there today, it's not there tomorrow.
Right.
And we argue the core basis of it. We're saying that a healthy hospital, let's say, for example, would be 70% Medicaid and 30% private pay. Now, why is Maimonides so high Medicaid and so low private pay? Because the people that can afford it are going to Manhattan. Now, why are they going to Manhattan? Sometimes because the clinical care is better, but most often it's not because the clinical care is better. We have great doctors. It's the systems within the hospital that aren't up to par like the Manhattan hospitals are, whether that's diagnostics, whether that's just the way the system works, the efficiencies within the system, or the mere facilities. There are certain hospitals in Manhattan that are gorgeous buildings. Our buildings are crumbling. So if you're sitting in a hospital in Borough Park and you're schwitzing because the air conditioning is not working or the air conditioning is not up to par, or you could be in a Manhattan building, which is a beautiful building, and everything is nicer and the nicer facilities. And when you have nicer facilities, guess what? The staff is nicer. So if they're in a better mood because they're sitting in a good facility and they like where they're working and they have nice lounges and they have nice workspaces and they have good systems, then they're going to be nicer to the patients. So this all translates into patient care. So if your facilities are crumbling and your efficiencies within the system are not there, then people travel to Manhattan thinking that those are better hospitals. So you're losing all that private pay. So if we can turn that around and get the money from the state to be able to redo the facilities, to make the efficiencies within the hospital operate better, then there is a very high chance, a high likelihood that those patients that are currently running to Manhattan would stay in Brooklyn because they would rather stay in Brooklyn. They live in Brooklyn. So their families live in Brooklyn. Oftentimes they don't even have cars. So they're struggling to get to Manhattan. So you have a hospital where clinical care is great, who needs an investment, a desperate investment in its facilities and a desperate investment in its efficiencies. And eventually through that, that's going to translate into better nursing care because the nurses are going to be happier. The patient care techs are going to be happier. Everybody's going to be happier. And better leadership, which will infuse more of this positive vibe within the hospital, then you can make a hospital that's going to capture that extra 10% of private pay. And if you capture that extra 10%, it sort of makes the other shortfall that you need the public system for a moot point.
Okay.
There's a lot in that, I know. But
There is a lot in that, but it sounds to me almost like a case for why the government should take over.
How do you see that?
Because if the hospitals that are already under the government system have nicer lounges and better spaces and everyone's in a better mood because everything's better funded, then why would that be a bad thing if it happened in Maimonides?
So in itself, it's not. It's actually a very good thing if it happened in that. But here comes the other part, right? The public system brings itself other drawbacks, which we believe are very, very substantial and will affect the communities very negatively in the future. And that's the reason that we're fighting it. So yes, you're right. The investments might be made, but the minute you become part of a public hospital, you become part of a public system. Now that public system doesn't necessarily feed people within the community. For example, there are people in Brooklyn that suffer from certain disabilities that get their health care in the public system of New York City Health and hospitals, and they get that part of their treatment in Manhattan and Bellevue. Bellevue has no availability of tertiary and quaternary care. They're overmaxed because
I mean, thank God I don't even know what those things mean.
it essentially means subspecialties. Like we'll take an easy one: open heart surgery, right? Open heart surgery is not a specialty that's found in all hospitals. There could be hospitals that treat heart attacks, that can treat every ailment. They can't provide open heart surgery. They can't provide ECMO. There's certain specialized services that exist within hospitals that because of their super specialty, they need a lot of specialists attached to it. For example, open heart surgery doesn't only need a high level of cardiology. It needs a high level of respiratory. It needs a high level of pulmonology. So there's different specialties that come together in the OR and post-OR in the recovery to provide services to that patient. Not every hospital has that level of specialty. So those are called tertiary and quaternary care, which is specialty of subspecialties, and so on, highly specialized care in essence. Maimonides is able to offer those highly specialized care. Not all the hospitals within New York City's health and hospitals are able to provide that. So if, let's say, somebody comes in, for example, right, complaining of chest pain to a hospital, one of the hospitals in health and hospitals, and they go into an angiogram and they see that they can't open up the artery for whatever reason, and they need to go for open heart surgery. That patient can't get that open heart surgery in the hospital that he checked into the ER. he has to be transferred to another hospital within the system that can provide those services.
Okay.
But those hospitals are extremely, extremely full. So sometimes instead of being able to get that surgery in 24 hours or 48 hours, you may have to wait a week. You may have to wait 2 weeks. Now, what does that do? It reduces your quality of care, because the longer you're sitting in a hospital waiting to get your definitive care, the more likely you are to suffer either something bad happens because of the wait. So there's that part of it, or you're more susceptible to infection. Whatever the case may be, the longer you stay in a hospital, the worse off you're going to be. So the delay in getting your definitive care, your definitive treatment, can actually cause a deterioration in your original problem, your original ailment. So if you're sitting and waiting, that's a problem. So right now, if someone checks into Maimonides and needs open heart surgery, he gets it pretty quickly. But if you're going to flood Maimonides with now becoming part of health and hospitals, so now you have a funnel of 11 or 12 hospitals throughout New York that are being fed now back into Maimonides because it's part of the system. So if there's a patient that checks into Coney Island Hospital, let's say, for example, I don't know what Coney Island Hospital offers or doesn't, so I'm just taking it as an example, but let's say if they check into Coney Island Hospital, right, and they need open heart surgery, instead of going to Bellevue where they go now, they're going to come to Maimonides, right? So if you're influxing all those patients now into Maimonides, you're going to stress the system. And we believe eventually that's going to lead to a lack of availability of clinical and medical care to the communities that the hospital was originally designed to serve. That is one of the big problems that we have with it.
Okay. What else do you have?
The other problem with it is that once you become part of a bureaucratic system, bureaucrats make decisions by whatever the political tides are of that day. So essentially, instead of being a standalone hospital that's being run by an administration, that's being monitored, guided, and advised by an independent board, you're now at the mercy of whoever is in City Hall. Because essentially, for all practical purposes, as soon as this becomes a public hospital, the CEO of the system is Dr. Mitch Katz. But the CEO of the CEO is Mayor Mamdani, because essentially the New York City mayor is the one that appoints the leadership of New York City Health and Hospitals. They don't have an independent board. They have a board packed with bureaucrats that are politically appointed. So the politically appointed bureaucrats that are running the board and making decisions that affect the community that the hospital currently serves. And once that happens, it's sort of down, like a very dark alley where you don't know what the next decision is going to lead. So also there's another thing in New York City Health and Hospitals is that they can't lose money. They don't have to make money, but they have to be at the end of the year at net zero.
Okay.
So if they see, for example, that delivering babies is losing them money in Maimonides and it's bringing down their overall numbers, guess what's going to happen after a short while? They're going to stop delivering babies. So that service is going to be closed. Let's say they realize that the NICU is losing their money, they're going to close down that service. But when you run a hospital as a charity, you run a hospital as a non-for-profit, you have the tendency of going a little bit into the negative 1 year and trying to figure out or bringing in private money to try to subsidize that service. You don't cut services as fast as you would if you're part of a overall public system. So where the fear is that there will be a cutting of services down the line that will be totally out of the control of the community.
Are there any other concerns?
So it's just essentially those are the main concerns, and they all stem from the fact that if the sale goes through, if the deal goes through, the current board of Maimonides ceases to exist, and there is really no way that the community or the representatives that currently sit on the board can have any impact on the future of Maimonides. So essentially, Maimonides will cease to be Maimonides, and it will start to become a health and hospitals hospital. And we believe that eventually patients will stop going there. And that we think is a very, very bad thing for our community.
Let's pause for a second to thank the fifth sponsor of this episode, Luxury for Charity. If you want to get away on vacation, but you might not have the money for it, you can buy a ticket for just $15. You can buy a ticket to win a trip to Barcelona for 2 people, flights, hotels, food is included, and you're going to have a blast. Barcelona is a very popular tourist attraction. Many, many millions of people visit every year, and there's lots to do. So for just $15, you can win a raffle with Luxury for Charity. They do these raffles every month. They've raffled off trips to Iceland, to Panama, to Puerto Rico, to Italy, to Greece. This month, they're doing the trip to Barcelona. For just $15, you can get a ticket. The money goes to charity. So you're already a winner because you're doing good things with your money. But you can also win and have a great vacation. Go to luxuryforcharity.org/Zions. I'm going to put a link in the description, hopefully also on the screen, so you can go buy your ticket, support charity, and hopefully you win. Thank you, Luxury for Charity. Last but not least, I want to thank my cousin Yitzi from Southside Smokehouse in Lakewood, New Jersey. Southside makes the best smoked meats. And if you haven't tried it, you're really missing out. They have amazing sandwiches, salads, all sorts of awesome dishes that you're not going to find anywhere else. He's very creative in the kitchen, and he makes good things happen. I go there regularly whenever I'm in town. Always have a blast. I've sent hundreds of other people there. Everyone always comes back with good feedback. So go to iwantsouthside.com. I'm going to put a link in the description. You can hop over to his restaurant, 315 Cedarbridge Avenue in Lakewood, New Jersey. Go over there, grab yourself a bite. You're not going to regret it. Thank you, Yitzi, and thank you, Southside. I hear all the concerns. To me, honestly, the one that stands out the most and is probably the worst thing is like letting the government into anything. I mean, look at the federal government, look at state governments, look at city governments. I'm not painting everyone with a broad brush, but overall, a lot of these systems, probably the majority of the systems, do not work well. I mean, look at sanitation, look at everything. The second the government gets involved in something, there are a lot of problems. Maybe in other countries they have it figured out. Here we don't. I walk into a DMV. Dealing with the government is like the most uncomfortable experience that you can possibly have.
That's right.
No one enjoys, like, the second the government's involved in something, you know it's not going to be a good day. So that I hear, like, the fact that the community had this hospital till now and was able to make the decisions that are beneficial to the community that the hospital serves is important. Government comes in, yeah, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And also, I don't want to throw out accusations, but the feeling on the street within the community is that Mayor Mamdani doesn't necessarily have our best interest in mind.
Understatement of the day, probably.
Okay, so I was trying to be polite and very politically correct, but to put a hospital that could save, or if actually, like, you know, the medical system is really, really important to a community, and to put that under the control of a government in general, and particularly this government, probably not a good idea. It's so weird that I'm going to bring this up because I like, again, we met earlier this morning for the first time, but I literally just remembered something that my 6th grade teacher told me in school. Is it possible that somebody in your family was harmed because of medical malpractice?
So my father died in Maimonides. He was.
I didn't realize it was Maimonides.
Yeah, my father died in Maimonides. He was 47 years old. I'm not going to get into what happened, but Maimonides did not hold a very favorable part in my heart for many years. And
why didn't you want to get into what happened?
I don't think it's important to get into that. This is not a personal issue. So
no, I understand, but I think it's going to help people understand the passion.
Right. No, but I think I want to turn around. So I want to say that Maimonides did not hold a very favorable part in my psyche or in my the way I felt about Maimonides. But I did join Atzal a long time ago. I joined Atzal 28 years ago. Okay. I'm a paramedic for the past 22, 23 years. And a lot of that was driven by the fact that my father died when I was 14. I felt that whatever happened to him could have potentially been avoided. And I've been in Maimonides. I've taken thousands of patients to Maimonides, thousands, and over my career. And throughout the time, I saw Maimonides in the not such good stages and in the better stages, and where it is today, in a very good place clinically. And I've taken family members of mine to Maimonides, post that, and I've been very, very happy with the outcomes and very happy with the service. And it's, I think, that passion that drives me into saying, so much work was put into this hospital by the community and by outside people to make the hospital to get the hospital to where it is today. And to gift that to New York City, which it's one thing if you were guaranteed that they would actually take care of that gift and make the gift prosper, is one thing. But if you're pretty convinced, as I am, that they're just going to eventually destroy the hospital, then it becomes very personal, becomes a very passionate matter. So that is what happened in Maimonides, and I think that to take Maimonides back to the old days, so to speak, would be a travesty and something that completely could be avoided, and I don't think should be allowed to happen. I do want to take it full circle back to originally you asked me about what the rest of the board believes.
Yeah.
Is they were marketed by the administration that the only savior to the hospital is New York City Health and Hospitals. So they weren't given any other options. None of this that we're discussing here in an hour podcast was actually ever clearly explained to the members of the board. A lot of the information that I give you here is things that we've found out post that movement to move the hospital into health and hospitals. And we think that if the board if the deal for health and hospitals was taken off the table for, let's say, a year or two, or whatever the case is, and completely opened it up to other potential outcomes. And one of the potential outcomes would be changing out the current leadership and bringing in more experienced leadership or fresh leadership, young leadership. Currently, the leadership is stale. In my opinion, the leadership is very stale. The board is stale. And if there could be a resurgence in the energy in the hospital, perhaps they can come up with better ideas. Perhaps this isn't the only idea. But if you're sitting in a boardroom and the administration is presenting to you that two options, either the hospital goes bankrupt or gets shut down, or we get saved by health and hospitals. So which option are you going to choose? Your fiduciary responsibilities to the hospital to make sure that the hospital continues to work. So they choose that. They choose going with health and hospital. Our approach is we're not choosing between good or bad. We're choosing between bad and bad. So it's not like, because we believe that if it becomes part of health and hospitals, it's not like Maimonides will continue. Maimonides will cease to exist. They believe, because they were told so, that Maimonides will continue to exist. It's just a name change. Anybody with a little bit of understanding and how these things work, especially within the governments, understands that it's not just a name change. It's a structural change in the hospital. And it may not happen day one and it may not happen year one, but it will happen. And it's usually not for the better.
Okay, so just going back to something we said earlier, I was very, impressed by your point about the fact that you said you personally have taken thousands of people to Maimonides because, again, this is just word of mouth, something a teacher in my school told me about your brother's father, which is also your father. It sounded like, someone from your family would never want to go back there. And if you felt comfortable enough to take other people there and your own family members, then that's a big statement. That means that things have gotten much better. The question, though, is how did the sale even come about? Like, whose idea was this, and when did it happen? Why did it happen?
So there's no sunlight on that matter. We have no idea. It was all internal. It came up as a vote to the board that we should enter into conversations.
How often do you have board meetings?
I think it's 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay, and everyone shows up?
Not everyone shows up. I show up to all of them. I think I've missed one since all the years that I've been on.
Okay, so you show up to this meeting, and what happens?
So it was presented that we needed to vote on a resolution that allows the hospital leadership to engage with health and hospitals because there was the conversation that perhaps there could be some kind of partnership or something could be done with them where it would be beneficial to the hospital's finances. That was unanimously approved. And then it went from there into just an emergency. Everything had to happen very, very quickly. All of a sudden, there was a deal on the table, and there seemed to be a lot of processes that are required of a hospital of this magnitude to be transferred over to a different hospital that were completely being avoided. And there has been some lawsuits that forced the hospital to not cut those corners and actually do what's required of them by law, anytime that there is a change of hands of such a large institution, especially when it's a non-for-profit.
We're going to take one more quick break just to let you guys know, if you want to follow my WhatsApp status to see what's happening in my life, the content I'm creating, the places I'm traveling to, the people I'm meeting, etc., 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 send me a message on WhatsApp to 929-777-5425. That's 929-777-5425. Send me a message. I will add you to the status and be able to follow my adventures all around the world. Now let's get back to the episode. Can you walk me through like the legal basis that you have to stop the sale of the hospital, or the acquisition, whatever you want to call it?
Well, we're not going to go through legal theories that we're working on, because I think that's important to keep confidential.
But this is, I mean, a lot of this is probably public information.
So whatever's public record is public record. There's legal arguments, but not necessarily the end legal theory that we're working with.
No, I understand. I just want to know like the basis to sue the hospital to stop the acquisition, which obviously is public information if a lawsuit was filed.
Right, yeah.
What is that basis?
So the basis is that we believe that there's other avenues that weren't properly pursued, or that there could be other avenues that weren't properly pursued. We believe that there wasn't enough transparency as to how the deal came about, and who the players are in the deal, and what the hospital gets out of it. There was also a lawsuit filed by other organizations within the community that argued an Article 78 argument.
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, so it's essentially a certain amount of procedures that need to happen when a hospital changes hands in New York State, and those weren't being done. There was so now it's sort of forced their hand to do it now, which is a public policy, which, in other words, you have to prove that there won't be any detriment to the communities that the hospital serves through an impact study, which wasn't done, and now they're doing the impact study. So these are all things that they were looking to bypass. They were taking a deal in a hospital that has close to $2 billion of revenue annually and serves 300,000 patients a year. And they were like taking this complex behemoth of an organization and looking to transfer it to a public entity, all in the span of a few months. So you're probably takes you longer to buy a house in New York City than it would take health and hospitals to buy this massive institution for $0. So there was a lot of steps that are required from a public disclosure standpoint that were completely being avoided. And different entities within the community and ourselves sued to make sure that those requirements were not being ignored, that those requirements were actually going to be fulfilled. And there is a reason for these requirements, right? One of them is the impact study, right? The impact study is to make sure to guarantee that this transfer from one entity to the next is not going to be detrimental in clinical care and in the availability of services to the communities within which the hospital sits. And that's a big process. It takes interviews from community representatives, from patients, past patients, so on and so forth, that builds this case to try to prove that the doctors that are there now are going to stay, that the services that are there now are going to stay, that there won't be any detrimental outcome to patients, current patients and future patients living within the community. That wasn't done. That's being done now. So we'll see what the outcome of that is. But that was something that they were looking to circumvent. And only a lawsuit brought them to make sure that they actually fulfill that need. There's an additional problem with the Attorney General, right? They were looking to get a sort of cursory review by the Attorney General. Anytime there's a transfer of a non-for-profit in New York State, it needs the blessing of the Attorney General. And the reason for that is that the Attorney General has to guarantee, if I sell a business, right, to you, the only person that cares about serving my interests and make sure that my interests are protected is me, right? So I am responsible for my interests. But if I'm a non-for-profit, there is no owner to a non-for-profit. The non-for-profit is there to serve many people that don't even know that the non-for-profit is there to serve them. Mm-hmm. So the Attorney General takes that position of sort of being the seller, the owner, and making sure that the interests of the seller and its clients are being well served. So if there's a transfer of a non-for-profit to another entity, it needs to be in a way where the Attorney General could say, okay, this non-for-profit didn't lose out by this transaction.
Or essentially the public didn't lose out.
Right, essentially, by extension, the public. Yeah. So They were looking for a cursory review by the Attorney General, sort of like a rubber stamp to say, okay, this is good. And no, the Attorney General said no, because of the efforts that we put in. The Attorney General said no, that this has to get reviewed in the court, and the court has to approve this. And then the court said that Article 78, which is a set of requirements that is required of a transfer of a hospital of this size, needs to be implemented here, and it cannot be circumvented. So all that is building up the case, which eventually the Attorney General can either say she gives her blessing, and that has a huge impact on the court, or she could say that she's against it, which again has a huge impact on the court, or she can say that she's abstaining, and then it's totally up to the judgment of the court. So we don't know which way that's going to come out yet, but what we do know is that all the things that need to happen in order to bring all these things to the forefront, to make sure that there's transparency and that everybody knows what's going on, are now happening, but they're only happening because we sued to make them happen. They were not happening without these lawsuits, which really is concerning it should be concerning to anybody, but especially concerning to a board member sitting on a board where its fiduciary requirement is not, its fiduciary responsibility is not to the people leading the hospital. It's not to the administration. We owe them nothing. It is to the institution and the institution's mission. So if you're sitting on a board of such an institution and you see that the administration is trying to sort of hoodwink a deal without following proper procedure, then that makes you really think that something nefarious is going on. I'm not making any accusations, but I would love to be proven otherwise, but until proven otherwise, we have to make sure that the hospital is protected. And the only way to make sure the hospital is protected is making sure that the hospital does what they're required to do by law. And now they're doing it because they were sued to do so.
Okay. You didn't make an accusation, you used the word nefarious. Do you have any theories as to why a hospital administration would try to ram through an acquisition like this without, crossing the T's, dotting the I's?
No. And I wouldn't speculate onto anything that I have no insight on. This is just a matter of fact that that's what was going on. The reasons behind it is not for me to concern myself with. For me to concern myself with is only one thing: to make sure that it doesn't happen, and that if the transaction does happen, it happens on the up and up, and everything else was taken care of.
Okay, where does the legal battle stand right now? Like, where's it holding at this moment in time?
So there's multiple cases. All the cases are ongoing. I mean, there's. I'm not going to go through the minutia of the back and forth, but right now, essentially, the legal system has forced the hospital to comply with what they need to comply with. What the outcome of all these studies and all these procedures that the hospital needs to do, what that outcome will be, and how that will affect the legal outcome is yet to be seen. I don't know. But, I think that it's important for people listening to understand that the people that brought these lawsuits, whether it's the members of the board or the outside organizations, didn't bring it to somehow bring notoriety to themselves, or just to create trouble, or just to to throw everything at the kitchen sink and see what sticks. That's not what was done over here. What was done over here was making sure that the interests of the communities are well protected, making sure that the hospital will continue to serve the community as it has for the past 100+ years, and making sure that there is nothing that is being done that will take that away without due process. So that is essentially the reason that we did it. We're not getting any benefits out of this. If anything, it's a tremendous headache for us. It's all pro bono on our part. There are people that are supporting financially the legal system.
I was going to ask you, who's funding the lawsuit?
So there's community representatives that have raised the funds to make this happen, and it's all private money, private donations going to make this happen. And I think that that's a testament to the importance of the hospital and the importance of the hospital to the communities. And I also want to say one more thing: that yes, this entire thing is being driven by the Orthodox Jewish community within Brooklyn, within Borough Park. But it is not only for us. We're here to protect also the rights of the Chinese American patients in the hospital, the Muslim patients in the hospital, the Italian American patients in the hospital. This is not a religious thing. It is by no way a racial thing. This is literally saving the hospital for the entire community. We're just doing all the work. We would love to get additional partners from the outside communities. They're welcome to join us. We would love nothing more. But they also have to understand that if what we're saying is true, and that the future of the hospital will be negatively impacted by its acquisition of health and hospitals, then it's going to be negatively impacting their care just as much as it's going to be negatively impacting the care of our communities. So we're here to make sure that, the ship continues to float for everybody on board, not only for one side of the ship. So that's something that they need to understand.
I understand. Are there any countersuits from the members of the board who want this acquisition to go through?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And just a random question I was thinking of, is there the structure of selling or getting the hospital acquired by the government, is this something that is only in the hands of the board and administration, or does the community get to vote on this?
So the only input the community has is through this health impact study, which is currently ongoing.
So it's like a survey?
Yeah, it's essentially a survey. It's
People are being called?
Yeah, they're getting called. Different parts of the community are getting called. Yeah, it's usually, people that have impact in the community, whether it's religious organizations or public service organizations. Those are the people that technically would represent the overall community because they have the pulse. They have the finger on the pulse of the community. So they're the ones that usually get interviewed. But yeah, it's designed to be able, if it operates properly, it's designed to be able to capture the scope of both the opposition and the other side of the argument that are in favor of making this transaction go through. That's the only real impact that the public has. Otherwise, once that gets done and let's say it's favorable to the hospital, then it's essentially down to a vote of the board. But the public, again, has impact through its representation through the Attorney General's office, because Attorney General is also there to protect the public. So,
okay. So is there, I don't want to scare you, but is there any oversight into how the survey is being done? Because that essentially, if there is anything nefarious going on and that's rigged, it could affect the entire way this plays out.
That's true, and I don't know the answer to that.
Might be worth looking into.
Yeah, we are. The survey is being conducted by Maimonides, which is a very reputable organization that deals in public policy and healthcare policy. So,
okay. You don't seem to me like a gambler, but if you were forced at gunpoint to put all of your net worth and bet on what was going to happen with the hospital, what do you think is going to play out in the end?
I think when we started, it was 90-10 in favor of the hospital. I think where we are today, it's probably 50-50, which is statistically a great place to be in this kind of argument. I don't think that people gave much credence to the original argument, thinking that it was going to be successful. I think that we've had multiple successes in the courtroom that have led to a favorable position where we are today. Obviously, that's not the home run, and we're still in the middle of the game. So whether we win or not, I don't know. And, time will tell. And I don't know what winning really looks like in this case, because we're not here to kill one specific thing or make another specific thing work. We're here to make sure that the process is being followed and that all avenues are being investigated and given a chance. And we believe that there's a better outcome out in the future, but we don't know that for a fact. So we just want to make sure that the process allows itself to work out through all these things and to make sure that it's been, the due diligence has been done and done correctly.
Understood. Let's say, and I'm assuming this would be a nightmare for you, but let's say the acquisition does go through and turns out that I was right and you were right, and the government getting involved in things usually does not make things better. Let's say 5 years down the road, is there any way to undo this and take the hospital back to the community?
No, that's what's scary about it. It is forever, and there's no way to claw it back.
Yeah, that is scary. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, for sharing your expertise. It's a very enlightening conversation. And good luck with your efforts.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to Mr. Waisbrod for coming onto the podcast to talk about what's happening at Maimonides. We appreciate it. And thank you for everything you do and have done for the community. I also have to thank all of the sponsors of the episode. So, of course, Shaya Weinberger from Luxury Kosher Villas. We want to thank Southside Smokehouse. We want to thank Mendy Weiss from JOYRIDE. Of course, we want to thank Barry Pearlstein from Hire on Us, Luxury for Charity, and Weber Tours. Thank you all. Trust me, guys, without the sponsors, this podcast wouldn't happen. So it's important to appreciate them, to give them your business. Thank you all. Last but not least, I want to thank every single one of you for watching or listening to this episode. It's a new show. Hopefully, we're going to do it often. I'm not promising anything, but I would like to try to get it to a place where it's going to be weekly. Maybe there'll be another one next week. Maybe there won't. I'm not going to tell you something and not deliver it. So if I say it's happening, God willing, with God's help, it's going to happen. That's why I'm not saying it, because I want to make sure that I'm up to getting this done. But there's going to be more episodes very soon. Stay tuned. Please leave us a comment if you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe. Send us a positive review on iTunes or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you very much. Have a great day. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next one.